Hi there, my name's Jane Anderson and this is the Jane Anderson Brand You Show. It's the podcast for experts who want to have greater impact, influence and income for their businesses and careers. As experts, we know that people buy from people and work with people who they know, who they like and who they trust. So I'm so glad you're here because it's that time again now to really amplify how you show up in the world. Hi there and welcome to the podcast, to the Jane Anderson Show. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here and to be able to share our very special guest this week. In this podcast, as you know, we always have a catch up and we talk to people, particularly more often than not, women who are building their own consulting practices and how you might be able to learn from them and some of the strategies that they've implemented, particularly after they've been in our community and some of the things that they have done. So if you would like to keep up to date on some of the podcasts that are coming out, make sure you jump onto the website, jane-anderson.com.au. You're welcome to join our community. You'll receive updates and tips and suggestions on some of the things that you can do to be able to particularly increase your influence, which is around really growing your consulting practice. And also find out about things like upcoming events and different things like that, particularly that are coming up in 2022. So in the meantime, I'm going to introduce you to our incredible guest today. Our guest today is a woman called Ally Nitschke. Ally Nitschke is a leadership communication expert. She's based in Adelaide and she really collaborates with organisations to help them really build what she calls courageous leadership and to help them employees and team members and anyone in the organisation have really courageous conversations and really get themselves into thinking boldly and courageous mindset. Her goal is to help people have the confidence to have those types of conversations. She spent over 15 years working as a leader and with leaders. She's an absolute rock star speaker. She also happens to be a mother of 4 young boys and she is extraordinary to watch. The 4 young boys are all under 8 and how she does her practice and how she makes it all happen is truly extraordinary. She's a bit of a dance floor junkie as well. She was actually a ballerina in a past life, professional dancer. And so she really gets being on the stage and being able to perform and to engage audiences. Her clients really also get her to come and help and give them, a bit of an Ally fix. She's got a real incredible energy and essence around her that she just really naturally draws people to her. But what she does is she has this incredible non-judgment about her. So she really gets that people struggle with saying, that fear that leaders have around saying the wrong things sometimes, or leaders might be putting out fires and rather than trying to work on their, really growing their people. She works around the performance of culture and having some of those difficult conversations. She's currently working on her book. Her book will be come out very soon, which is around the rise of the courageous leader. And she helps them sort of get over that discomfort of having some of those difficult conversations. She shows incredible compassion, empathy, and all those traits that you really want to be able to include sometimes in your own courageous conversations. What I love most about Ally is her ability to wing it. She walks her talk, so she has, that confidence. She has this incredible charm and courage, and you're just in awe of how she makes everything look so effortless and easy, and yet being able to really help you to know what to say. She's super practical. So make sure you keep an eye out for her on stages in 2022. But today, in the meantime, I'm thrilled to be able to share her with you. Please enjoy the podcast in today's episode with Ally Nitschke. I would love to hear your insights and what you learn. So please reach out to me, send me a message on the website or jane@jane-anderson.com.au. I would love to hear what you learn and to be able to help you keep in touch for any future ones. Okay, enjoy the podcast. All right. Hi there, Ally, and welcome. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today. I have been so excited about interviewing you because you are truly extraordinary with the business or practice you've created. And I've been dying to get under the bonnet with you. You know, we see these amazing, you've been awarded top 10 podcasts, top 5 podcasts,
top 5,
yeah. Top 5 in Australia. You know, you just seem to be putting all this amazing content out, and you're doing some really incredible stuff. You're on stages, writing your blogs, you've got a book coming. Wow. So I'm keen to, thanks for your time today. And I just really wanted to take the opportunity to jump on and go, oh my God, how does she do this? So, so
thank you.
Ally, you've built an incredible practice, and you're on this extraordinary trajectory. And are you happy to share with us a bit about your practice? Because you're in Adelaide, yeah?
Yes.
And so, you know, I think sometimes we think, oh, you can only do it if you're in a capital city that's like Melbourne and Sydney, but yes, I'd love to know, how did you get into this? How did it all start? How you and what's been your big driver behind starting your practice?
I love it. Thank you so much for having me today as well, Jane. I'm so honoured to be on your podcast and amongst the amazing guests that you've already had. I think I mentioned to you the other day, I've been binging all things your podcast, so I'm feeling a bit special getting to be in that list as well. So yes, I am in Adelaide, and for anyone who's lived in Adelaide or does live in Adelaide, we've got a bit of a small town, I guess, mentality. One of the things we're most famous for is, you know, they talk about the 6 degrees of separation, whereas in Adelaide, it's really only 2. Everyone knows someone who went to school with someone's cousin. So it's an interesting space when I first entered into this world of thought leadership and building my own practice, because I thought, oh, well, who's going to pay attention to me from little old Adelaide? Needless to say, over the last 12 months, my mindset has shifted somewhat. It turns out that Adelaide's actually quite big, and there is opportunity all over the place, and that's only becoming more and more prolific and prominent. You know, in the last 12 months, there's definitely a lot happening here, but also, I think one of the big things, and I know, you know, the last 18 months, 2 years has been pretty interesting space for anyone who's a speaker, who's on stages, who's, you know, normally delivering something face to face, is it's a big world. It's a big world. Yeah. So no longer are we restricted by flight times and borders and all of those things. We've got this beautiful opportunity where we can jump online and connect with anyone around the world. And I've certainly found that to be amazing to be able to access people internationally that I wouldn't normally come across or even reach out to. So that's been pretty phenomenal. How did I get started? Well, interestingly, you know, but I've got 4 young children at home, and I started my practice when my youngest was 6 weeks old. So 6 weeks, still on my shoulder, and I was like, you know what? I've got 4 boys. I know, right? Nuts. So they're at the moment, they're 8, 6, 4, and 3. So very young now. But when my little guy Eddie was a teeny tiny baby, I was just thinking, the 9 to 5 is not designed for women in the workplace. I was working in the federal government and had been there for a number of years, but felt underutilized, had kind of, you know, by the time I went on mat leave and then went back off of mat leave and then worked full time, and I found the juggle okay, but it wasn't really what I wanted my life to look like. And my business, Made for More, was essentially me standing there holding a 6-week-old baby. And I was applying for a new role at the time. And I spoke to my husband, Alex, and he was like, you know what, babe, it's not the end of your chapter. Like you still got some life left in you. And I'm like, oh, right. And I realized right then that my career to date in the public sector probably hadn't quite reached the peak that I was hoping to achieve. And, you know, now that we'd finished having children, I was like, right, game on. So started my practice early on with my little guy. And since then, it's been a huge learning curve. So before I was in the public sector, I was working privately, banking and finance, have worked across many different industries and sectors along my time. But getting started, I think it's, it's such a cliche, but you just have to get started. You just have to go. You just have to go. And I think probably one of the biggest lessons for me in terms of building my practice. So we work now with leaders, organizations, teams mostly around courage. So courageous leadership, courageous women, courageous conversations, courageous teams, all of the courage pieces that come into what we would normally identify as soft skills, air quotes. But I didn't have a background as a HR manager, which I think predominantly a lot of thought leaders in the leadership space and team space have that background, whereas I didn't have that. So all of my learning, all of my business is based on real life experience, and I have had a diverse range of great teams, not so great teams, great leadership, not so great leadership, and drawing on all of that and going, how can we make leadership better for people around the world? And that's really where I'm up to these days.
Awesome. So tell us, when you started your practice, so you started out and then what happened? Did you just start getting clients? They just sort of heard about you, or did you have to start contracting, or like, how did you actually get all this off the ground and start to become as busy as you are today?
Yes. Excellent question. No, they did not just magically fall in my lap. That would have been nice. And naively, I kind of thought that's what would happen. You whack a logo up and be like, hey, I'm doing this now. But no, they didn't come from nowhere. So I think probably for the first 12 months of my business, so we've just turned 3, the first 12 months, I really only dipped my toe in and kind of messed around with it a bit, spent a lot of time doing things that didn't result or didn't get really any results, whether it was revenue, whether it was clients, whether it was moving my thought leadership. It was really only actually when I accidentally met you at a PSA event. I know we've talked about this before. So someone that we both follow, Rowdy McLean, I know he's a close friend of yours. I'd connected with him on Instagram and saw that he was coming to Adelaide. And I was like, oh, great. I want to get one of your books. Can you bring it over? Having no idea really who he was or what this PSA, so Professional Speakers Association, was. And rocked in to anyone in Adelaide. It was at the Arca rocked in, and it was the national, wasn't it? The National Speaking Conference. So there was all of these like amazing speakers, and it was like an actual association for speakers. And I was like, what is happening here? Like, who are these people and where have you been my whole life? So that was like super inspiring. I was like, yes, these are the kind of people I need to be around, which was really the introduction into the whole idea of thought leadership. So my whole life, I've been told I have too many ideas and just to like calm down and, focus on one thing. And my little mind's like ping, 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 ping. But what about if we do this? And what about this? And what do I think about that? So falling into PSA where they were like, yes, develop your ideas. I was home, and you were one of the speakers actually on that day. It was a very short one, but you were talking about content. And one of the things that you said, you might not actually remember this, was during your speech, you said something along the lines of, oh, you need somewhere to capture your monkeys. And I was like, oh my God, my monkeys are out of control. I need my monkeys. And that's probably when we started working together in Content Club, I think is when it first started. So really developing that thought leadership and going, what are my ideas and what do I really think about this whole leadership thing? And it took a bit of courage, which is ironic since I talk about courage, to put those ideas out there, because I think we're conditioned too much to go, what's everyone going to think? And what if I'm wrong? And what if what I'm saying is not right? And what I'm still learning, is that it doesn't matter, because it's my perspective and it's my experience and it's my take on what I think needs to happen next and what I think is coming up. And it's really validating to have that perspective. So really that's where it all started with you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And
I'm just in awe on the sidelines, just going, wow.
It's very mutual, very, very mutual. So I think that's really where it started, is unpacking ideas. And I think when you start unpacking your ideas, you become more and more clear on what it is that, like, from my perspective, what it is that I do that's impactful to other people, what it is that leaders need from my perspective to be able to help elevate them. You know, some of the things that I'm most known for is around courageous conversations. So that's something that comes quite naturally to me.
Yeah.
And when we go, okay, well, what is that? And how do I talk about that? Then when I started doing this content and developing my content, my ideas, and publishing my weekly newsletters on LinkedIn and getting that cadence into effect is really when I sort of started to see that shift in people coming to me and saying, oh, I read that article that you wrote, or I heard that podcast that you were a guest on or that you held. I'm really interested. How do we work together? And that's when I started to see a big shift.
Right. So the actual coming up with the ideas or being present with your ideas, having a way to capture them and getting them down somewhere, and then developing them and not just developing, but then actually publishing and getting it out. So I know you've recently been awarded in the top 5 podcasts in Australia for your Made for More podcast, and you interview a massive range of people and talk all about courage in their lives and when they've been challenged in the most challenging times, and then finding their courage and how they've gone about that. You have what I love about what you're doing with this is almost like it's the research that you're doing and building this whole bank of knowledge and advancing the thinking around that whole courage message. What I love about, you said before, your practice is unique in that you really narrow in on that courage message. And whether it's courageous leaders, courageous teams, courageous women, you do some work around the diversity space, particularly women who are building their courage, and courageous communication, if I want to speak on stages. So you've really narrowed into that courage space and then gone, okay, I can work with a variety of people, and you're starting to build your practice that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think have been the biggest things that you've implemented, like, through the time over that we've worked together? You've done an incredible amount of work. Like, you've published your podcast, you have you've been out selling programs to organizations, like we're talking multiple 5-figure programs. You've got conversations happening with heading into 6 and some involvement in some 7-figure ones. But when starting out, like particularly in this last, say, 2 years, and what do you think has been the biggest thing out of all those things that you've done? List building, speaking on stages, knowing how to build the list from a stage, the collateral, value propositions, how to sell, all those things that you've implemented over the last 12 months. What do you think, or is it just, or even a mindset around what have been the big things that have been the shifts for you, do you think?
I think all of those things. I think it's kind of works a little bit like a snowball effect. So I think content, certainly unpacking the content and my thoughts around my thoughts, really boosted my confidence, which meant I put myself out there a lot more. And then I think something that we've worked together quite closely on, and within your Women with Influence community, is just that value, like valuing yourself, valuing your expertise. For a long time there, my internal monologue or my itty bitty shitty committee was like, you're brand new and what do you think you're doing? And wasn't particularly helpful. But then a big shift that I had was, well, you've been doing this for nearly 20 years and actually you probably do know a little bit of something. So I think it's that mindset, getting over yourself essentially, and just going, it's not about you. Yes. And then another big one has been just the cadence. So the regularly showing up, the content that we do each month, like our regular cadence around what's going out there, what are we talking about, what are the programs that we're talking about, and having that all in your calendar and going, okay, well, it's Tuesday, this is what we do on Tuesdays, and now it's Friday and here's what we do on a Friday. That's been huge, particularly the IP, the collateral, so all of the brochures around the products and the programs that I sell and that we sell here, and how that all fits in together. So all around, all of the work that we've done together has just been huge. And I think just pulling it all together, whereas when I first started, it was very much a scattergun approach. I didn't really have any strategy. In fact, I think I joke to you often that I think I might have some strategy now. That's been huge, going, okay, well, what am I doing for this quarter? What am I doing for the whole of, next year, 2022? We're just starting to plan. And then going, right, what do I need to do to make that happen? Whereas previously it was very much in a reactive space, and to use your own words, order taking. Whereas now I'm going, okay, well, here's what people need. Here's what I'm really good at. Here's how we deliver it, and here's the collateral and the IP and the information that goes behind it as well.
I love that, Ally, because a big part of it, sometimes we're often just too close to our own stuff, aren't we? Like we go, oh, but I do this all the time. We've been doing it for 20 years. Like, yeah, I'll just jump in. I remember one of our very first conversations, which was around a series of webcasts, I think, which was, or no, it was not webcasts, it was face-to-face events, and they're all sort of an hour each. And going, well, hold on, if you do an hour of that, that's like in the middle of the day. You can't sell anything else for the day. And now you're only doing, like, if you're doing that for $200, you've just only sold a $200 day. It's not a $200 an hour thing. And I know you've worked so hard on just getting those value propositions right and knowing your worth. One of the questions I had for you around, and being in Brisbane, I always think Brisbane is a little bit like Adelaide in that, I think the price points and around every market is a bit different, and the clients and the industries are different, but it's really easy to go, all the big clients are in Sydney and Melbourne, and I remember one of our early conversations around people in Adelaide just don't spend. I don't think there are any clients for me in Adelaide. And regardless of where you live, I think Brisbane's a big one. Perth, that can come up, and even other cities, for those who are listening, thinking, I don't have any clients in my city, or people in our city just don't spend any more than $5,000 a day. The market won't bear that. What are your thoughts on that for those? Like, if someone's sitting there thinking that, and you think back to what you've uncovered as a result of, having those conversations and going out and talking to people, what are you noticing, and what's changed for you in your thinking around those sort of limits on price points and day rates?
I would love to say that it's been, like an overnight shift. It has been teeny tiny incremental steps the entire way, and you've been there for the journey of me going, I've just increased my price a little bit, and you're like, nope, still too cheap. I think one of the biggest shifts for me has actually been the feedback from my clients. So when I ran a program recently, and there was an eclectic group of leaders from all over the organization, so different divisions of the organization. And there was one woman here in the group, and she would have been probably how I would describe like the most experienced, had, done various roles, been a GM in multitude of companies. And she took me aside at the end of the program. She was like, that is the best leadership program I've ever done. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I thought I was telling you to suck eggs. She was like, no, absolutely not. And I think we're probably, and women as well, are conditioned to go, oh, don't be silly, that's ridiculous. And I've decided to start taking some of those compliments at face value, and recognizing that actually I'm having a huge impact, which is the whole aim of the game, right? To impact leaders. But listening to that and taking that and receiving that, that feedback has really elevated me to go, yeah, it's okay to charge more. It's okay to charge a premium price, because people are getting premium results, a premium experience, a premium network. And I think it has been, I'm doing my hands up and down, like, they're racing. It has been one of those journeys where it's had to be incremental, but just listening to the friendly mirrors, as they say, of what people are going with. And having and recognizing other people within the community, within my network, that are doing amazing stuff. We're not talking about $5,000 days. Some of the women are signing multi-six and multi-million-dollar deals. And you're like, oh, well, if they can do it, then I can probably do it as well. And firing the clients that were only prepared to pay those low lower dollar days or lower dollar pieces, and going, how can we package it up so that it's, a longer program or multiple programs, or, instead of it being a 1-day lunch and learn, how can we sell 8 or 10 or whatever it happens to be? So yeah, stretching my thinking around how can we bundle it up differently.
Right. So thinking about not just, oh, I'm here to just sell this day thing, is what's the actual problem that they've got, and well, can that be solved in a day? Probably not. But I guess what I've noticed is that difference in thinking between, oh, they just need this thing, versus, and that's when the lower price points kick in, versus, well, hang on, what are you actually trying to solve here?
Yeah.
And what's the journey that I need to articulate to take you on that? And then being able to say, well, to do something like that is, well, that's going to take 6 months, or that's going to take 12 months, or that's going to take 3 months. And instead you've got the shift from a $4,000 program to a $40,000 program. And it's not about trying to sell the $40,000 thing. It's more, well, let's focus on what problem we're actually trying to solve here first, because we're not here to rip a client off and just sell $40,000 deals just for the sake of it and just take people's money. Is to be able to go, well, actually, or to go, I want to sell this $40,000 thing. You go, well, okay, well, what's the problem we're solving? Oh, I don't know. I just want to sell a $40,000 thing.
Yeah.
So you've put a lot of work and energy, effort into, like, I love that you think so much about your customer. Every time we've talked, you've talked so deeply about the world that they're in and the problems that they're having, or the experiences, but also the opportunities that are there for them. And what I also love about what you're saying is that there's also some of these clients that you've worked with have also been not-for-profits. So it's really easy to fall into, oh, well, not-for-profits don't spend, or they, the assumptions that we have in our practices. People in Adelaide don't buy, not-for-profits don't buy, or no one's got budget. All these stories that we tell ourselves. You've blown all those myths out of the water.
Yes.
All those assumptions, and by going out and just finding out. You've also done a bit of speaking. Are you happy to share, because you did quite a big event? Adelaide fortunately hasn't had the lockdowns that some of the other cities have had. Tell us about your speaking and what kind of what kind of impact that's had for your practice, particularly over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love speaking. In fact, way back when I was in my early leadership years, so I was maybe 21, 22, I had a coach back then as part of the development that I was going through. And I was like, you know what, I just want to be a motivational speaker. They probably said the wrong thing, actually. They were like, well, you will never be able to do that right now. You need more experience, and, you don't have any life stories. And I'm thinking, oh, I've done quite a bit in my short amount of time. But I think one of the things I love about speaking so much is I spent my entire childhood on a stage. So I was a professional ballet dancer before I started real work, air quotes again. So I actually love and thrive in that performance, in that stage, the anticipation, the excitement, all of that. So I love it. I'm definitely in my element, and being able now to have a huge impact on a large audience over an hour, 45-minute keynote, and just be able to trigger some different thinking, trigger some action to have for the people that are in that audience is remarkable to me. And I think because what's the question? How much has it impacted? Yeah. I think it's been impactful because, it's a pretty big deal. A lot of preparation goes into your keynote. You want to have bang as much great things in there as you possibly can in a short amount of time without overwhelming people. But what I've noticed from a practice perspective is particularly some audiences is the flow-on effect that happens afterwards. I'm there to do a 45-minute keynote. Next minute, I was, hearing from the person I was sitting next to at the event's sister's cousin who's in Sydney that wants to talk and, had heard about it. And I think it's been great from a positioning perspective, which I didn't got a little bit caught up in, being on the stage. From a positioning perspective, I love it. So there's always that, the high of coming off the stage, but being able to share your message with as many audiences as possible. And then, being being a speaker, I think, is great from a brand positioning.
Right. And, even just building that list, like what was the size? There was a big audience that you spoke to in Adelaide, and you came off stage. I remember you going,
I called you, yeah.
Leads. What am I supposed to do with all these people?
Yeah.
Because you got some good systems in place. Are you happy to share a bit about like kind of that process? Because were you going to do lead gen going into that event? Were you just thinking, I'll just go in and present and go, yay?
Do you want the real answer or the fake answer?
Yeah.
I mean, I've spoken a lot, and before I kind of realized the importance of building your list, I kick myself now for how many times I've spoken and had great feedback, but never ever to see these people again. So having a bit of this little word strategy in there has been a real game changer, and it's made me, I guess, think about where I want people to go and what I want them to do and take away after the event. So having something in place, whether it's a opt-in or an SMS burst or a, hey, I do a daily dose of courage, which people love. But how do we get those people in the audience that are connecting on the list so that we can keep connecting with them through those that cadence of the weekly newsletters, keep them engaged, because they want to find out more. Most people that you hear that you are like, yes, actually, that was amazing. They want to know more about it. They're curious about it. We've elevated their thinking in some way. And I just think, keep that connection going.
Yeah. It's always, Keith Abraham talks about speaking. He always says, well, today's the start of a conversation. And I think, and Dave Staunton would say, presenting about get them hot and horny. I want to know more. Like, you've now got me, like, my elevated thinking, you've got me, thinking more. And now how do I get to learn more? Where do I access more? And so being able to build that awareness, isn't it, getting out in front of those audiences where you would never otherwise cross paths with perhaps some of these people. These people are hard to access, but you've been so and speaking's not for everybody, but if you can work out your version of that and work out the audiences, in your case, that here's your message, and you can work across a multiple, groups of types of audiences, then it makes sense to go out and speak to plenty of those people to build that list that way. If someone was sitting here listening to you, and so before I say that, you often talk about Ed Mylett. I know you're a big fan of his. And I think what's the quote that you often say that he says it's just about the echo?
Yeah, so he's got a great podcast. It's called The Ed Mylett Show, but one of his episodes, and I heard it ages ago, it's called The Echo of Life.
Right.
And in that podcast episode, highly recommend it. I'll send you the link so you can put it in the notes for anyone who's interested. Yes. Is he talks about, similar to what Keith Abraham says, is, whatever effort you're putting in now, you'll see the benefits and reap the rewards of that at some stage in the future. You just don't know when it's going to be. So whether it's 30 days, whether it's 60 days, whether it's 96 months, whatever happens to be, but putting in the effort for your future, like put your effort in now for your future results later. And that's something that I'm always reminded of whenever, in this thought leadership practice, when you're running your own business, there is the peaks and the troughs and the bit of the roller coaster, but putting in the effort now for tomorrow's benefit. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next time to do the work? Right now. And I love his take on it, just the way that he explains the importance of doing it even when you don't feel like it, because at some stage it's going to catch up with you, and at some stage you're going to see it. And, for my own, I guess, personal experience, that's been really true. The more I put my foot down on the accelerator, turns out that turns up the dial, whether it's 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months sometimes as well. Yeah,
I think you're a great example of, as you said, Keith Abraham talks about activity solves inactivity. And if nothing's happening, make something happen. Don't sit around and wait and complain that it's not happening. Like, put something on. So you've done things like you've put breakfasts on, where you've created events for your ideal clients to come along. You've shared your IP. They get to connect with each other. That's building leads. Your podcast is a good example. The content you're putting out, your newsletter, you've got a book coming soon. all those things, and doing it with 4 little boys, and being an amazing mum, just trying to, we're all in awe of just how you do it. But you've brought on support over the last 12 months. So you've engaged people like VAs, and now started to be able to get some things and some systems in place and delegating, so that you can get those in place. So you come off stage, right, here's the leads, we get those in the system, what's the follow-up, all those types of things that are starting to happen now. So that, like you said, you've got strategy and systems so that you can wing it and do all the other creative stuff, that you can be creative, because all those things are in place.
Yeah.
If someone was listening to this, Ally, and they were saying, oh my God, Ally is so me, that is me to a T. What advice would you have for them? Like, if you had your time again, or if you could, if you're in your shoes 12 months ago and you wish you'd done anything differently, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Really good question. And I think just to caveat my response, please don't think I'm doing this all by myself. As Jay mentioned, I do have an incredible team who are good at all the things that I'm not good at, which I think is a really important thing, is find people that fill your gaps, because I'm not interested in attention to detail. I'm not interested in learning how to systemize and automate and data entry and the things that don't light me up. There are people on my team that love it, like absolutely love it. So I think finding people around you that can support your weaknesses, so to speak. And also for those other women who are trying to juggle work-life balance, I also have an incredible husband who does a lot. We're 50-50 in all things, which does make a huge difference. And I know that that's not the case for everyone. So just to caveat, I don't do all of the things all of the time. I have people around me that are incredible. But I think a few pieces of advice for anyone who's, a baby Ally or in that stage, is find a really great coach. I jumped in early on, but I think finding someone who is doing what you're doing and doing it at an exceptional level is really important. Building a community around you. So if you've worked with Jane or heard any probably of our other podcasts talking about Dunbar's model of who's on your panel of advisors or your advisory panel, that is so important. And I think mostly to get out of your own echo chamber. Like, it's really easy to get stuck in your own thinking and being surrounded by people who haven't elevated their thinking, or they've kind of, reached their pinnacle. So having people on your advisory panel that can stretch you, and when you're going, holy moly, whoa, then you probably found the right people to go, I want to hang out with them a little bit more. And I think, having that cadence in place as well, whether it's your cadence on newsletters, cadence on publishing things, doing the work, and just sticking to 5 things a day to get done. We tend to, as women, particularly write huge to-do lists that take longer to write than they do to execute. So just focus on what's important, is my advice.
Yeah, I love it. So get the right mentor, get the community around you, cadence and rhythms, particularly around thinking, publishing, newsletters, that kind of stuff. And I love these 5 things a day. You can't do everything in a day, but just choose your top 5 of what you're going to get done and prioritize.
Hot tip, email's not one of them.
Yes, absolutely. The sooner you can get that one outsourced and delegated, the better. Thank you so much for jumping on. If people want to follow you, Ally, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, sure. I hang out mostly on LinkedIn. That's my place. So you can find me, Ally Nitschke. I'll spell it because it's tricky. It's Nitschke. But I would love to connect on there as well. So thank you very much. If anyone's interested in some more stuff around courageous conversations, we've got a little guide that we're trying to spread far and wide so that people can have those tough conversations. So that's madeformore.com.au/courage. And I'll send you a copy of that so you can follow along.
great. We'll pop it in the notes so everybody can access that as well and download it. So that would be terrific. Thank you so much for being part of the day. And we hope to have you on again next year when we're celebrating bigger milestones even more.
Yes, thank you so much.
Again.
And thank you always for your expertise and generosity. I love being part of your community and having you on my own panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ally.